Hola, SAP developers. Welcome to the first session, part of the DevTOEFL 2025 integration track. Today, we have a great lineup for you, so make sure you check out the different sessions we will be doing during the day. Before we start, to drop us your questions in the chat window, as we will be monitoring it during the session, and we will answer your questions at the end of the session. Okay? So, this will be a very exciting session where we will learn about pipeline for cloud integration. Today, we have Alex, who you might know given the many blog posts that he has published on SAP community. He's part of the PM team of SAP Integration Suite and one of the masterminds behind the pipeline for cloud integration. Without any further delay, hola, Alex, over to you.
Hola, Antonio. Thanks a lot. So also welcome from my side. So as Antonio mentioned, I will cover today the pipeline for cloud integration, which has come up as a concept, right? When we have introduced this last year. And I have to say that we have built so many new features into this concept that it really has become a solution nowadays, right? So as said, my name is Alex Bunchu. I'm with the product management for integration suite and actually focusing on the integration, the migration from SAP Process Orchestration to the SAP integration suite. Good. Before I explain a bit about this pipeline concept, just to get a context. So this might be a situation at your side. So you might have still process orchestration running, our on-prem integration platform, where you mainly run your on-prem to on-prem scenarios. You might already have the SAP integration suite in place, where you leverage different integration style, like post integration, data integration, API-based integration, event-driven integration. You run your cloud to cloud or on-prem to cloud scenarios for an integration suite. And the important information here on this slide is the very last section here, right? SAP Process Orchestration is actually running out of maintenance. So the standard maintenance goes until end of 2027, and the extended maintenance goes until 2030. But that's it, right? After 2030, there's no support actually for SAP NetWeaver, and as such, no support for SAP Process Orchestration, which is part of SAP NetWeaver, right? And so you're gonna move to sort of this architecture, right? The hybrid integration architecture with SAP Integration Suite being the solution to run your integrations, and with an optional installation, having edge integration cells and on-prem runtime connected to integration suite, where you can actually run your pure on-prem to on-prem scenarios. Now the question is how to move actually there, right? And here this shows you an overview of the different tools that we provide, services, best practice, and so on, that actually facilitates the move from SAP Process Orchestration to integration suite, right? So we have best practices like the guidelines. We have migration guide that explains you for specific topics how to implement, for instance, a Java mapping, or how to migrate a Java mapping into cloud integration, how to run other proxy scenarios on cloud integration, right? This is all covered actually in the post orchestration migration guide. Beside this, we have tools in place. One is an assessment tool, which is a capability of integration suite. And this allows you to assess your situation, right? So assess all your scenarios within a process orchestration system that gives you visibility about whether this scenario can be run on integration suite, and also a rough effort estimation. And another tool is a migration tool, right? This is directly built into the designer of cloud integration as part of the integration suite, and where you would then run a wizard that guides you through the creation of artifacts in cloud integration based on your configuration in Process Orchestration. Besides this, there are also a couple of services that you can leverage. Some are free of charge, like a migration factory service that do a free assessment, right? And there are also services from consulting, from max attention, or from premium engagement colleagues, if you have stuff like max attention contract. And there are also services from partners, which would do the migration from end to end. I would like to focus here in this session on the pipeline concept. And this is more or less, this more or less in the area of best practices, guidelines. But as said, this has come up as a concept at the beginning. So we actually call this pipeline concept. In the meantime, I tend to rather call it pipeline for cloud integration because I think it has really become a proper solution. We have added further features based on your demand, right? And the pipeline concept is actually those are packages. In the meantime, those are different packages. At the beginning, this was one single package. Now I come to this in a minute. Why we have split this up, right? So those are packages on the Business Accelerator Hub. So when we provide this as a standard solution to run your scenarios on cloud integration as a capability of integration suite. So you can see this as a sort of framework that allows you to do error handling, exactly once, guaranteed delivery, message restart, so sophisticated message restart in a common way, right? And as you can see, so it actually consists of a bunch of generic flows. Those are the blue ones, right? And queues, which are shared across different scenarios. And on the other side, scenario-specific flows that you need to create, or the migration tool can actually automatically create this for you, right? I can also then later on show you how this looks like. And the motivation, there are actually different motivations why we came up with this, right? One motivation was, as I said, to provide error handling, message restart, guaranteed delivery out of the box, as you're used to have this in Process Orchestration. Another motivation was to efficiently use the resources which are restricted on cloud integration, right? Especially the number of JMS queues, right? If you create a JMS queue for each single async communication to decouple your flows, right, and to ensure exactly once delivery, you end up with thousands of JMS queues, right? And with this approach, you can actually reduce the number of JMS queues to a minimum, actually 2 JMS queues. Taking into account that dead letter queue, if you have reached the maximum restart, you would then at the end end up with 4 JMS queue, right? What you can also see is the partner directory here in this picture. And we heavily use the partner directory to be able to dynamically configure the behavior of the scenarios, right? Good. Some special cases. We do have, beside those generic flows and partner directory support, we do actually also have 2 generic flows if you have XI proxy scenarios or IDOC scenarios, right? So here we provide actually one single entry point for IDOC inbound and one single entry point for XI proxy inbound. Then you can actually decide whether you have one single entry point across all systems and across all scenarios, or if you actually duplicate this flow and defining one single entry point for each sender system, right? This is also up to you. Then we also support receiver-specific JMS queues if required, right? Default is that you use one single generic outbound queue, but if you like to handle specific receivers differently, right, then you can also define receiver-specific JMS queues. Then there are also different bypass options available, like point-to-point, right? When you have a point-to-point scenario, then you don't need to go through all pipeline steps, and then there is an option that you can bypass some pipeline steps. We support extended receiver determination, right? This is a feature on process orchestration where you actually run a mapping to determine the number of receivers, right? And if you use this in process orchestration, you can actually reuse this also in cloud integration, right? And you don't need to create this XSLT, which we actually use to determine the number of receivers. Instead, you can simply reuse your mapping from process orchestration, right? And we have a couple of different exits built in that allows you to implement your custom-specific stuff, whether it's custom receiver determination, custom interface determination, or custom preprocessing, without actually changing the generic flows that we provide, right? And with this, you're not cut off of any updates, right? So the approach is that you don't change the generic flows. You deploy them once, and then you use them across different scenarios, and you just configure them, right? The moment you change the generic flows, then it's cut off of the updates, right? Because we ship on a regular basis, we actually ship updates of the flows, as said, based on customer input, customer demand, right? So we are here in touch with a lot of customers and a lot of partners who actually have provided us feedback, which can be improved in the pipeline concept, and we have actually realized this. Good. Then one important point for those who have run the pipeline in the past, right? So in the past, we actually only had one single package, right? And it turned out that to set up different pipelines, or for some use cases, it's not flexible enough, right? And you would actually create too many stale objects, right? Too many objects that you don't need. And so we decided to split up the different integration flows into 4 different packages, right? Now we have one generic inbound, which contains just 2 integration flows, would be the generic IDOC and the generic XI inbound. We have the pipeline itself. Those are the main generic pipeline steps. And then we have one package which has a generic outbound, right? And then we also have one package which you usually wouldn't install on a production system. Those contain all the templates for your scenario-specific flows and for the extension flows, right? And so why have we done this? I said, to better support the setup of different pipelines, right? If you like to have different pipelines in parallel, for instance, you might to assign different pipelines to different organization structures, right? Or you might like to change the JMS settings to have a pipeline where you assign a higher number of concurrency to read the messages from the JMS, and as such, implement a sort of prioritization, right? And another use case would be that you define different XI inbound flows or IDOC inbound flows per sender, right? And then you only need to actually copy this generic inbound flow. And the last use case, as said, is the receiver-specific JMS queue, right? So for those of you who have actually run the pipeline in the past, right, and you would have noticed that the old package has been deprecated in the meantime, right? And then you need to switch to the new package, right? I mean, the old package still works. Also, the script collection that we have there still works. If you update the package, you will notice that the name has been now changed to deprecated, right? But it still works, so you still have time to actually do the move to the new packages. But if you do the move, then best practice is to undeploy all generic flows, right? And then configure all the new flows, deploy them. And if you use scripts from the script collection in your scenario-specific flows, then you actually need to replace those scripts with the local scripts, right? Good. Then you don't need to actually, if you move from process orchestration, you actually don't need to start from scratch, because now we have embedded the pipeline approach into the migration tool, right? In the migration wizard, you can then decide between standard approach and pipeline approach. For the standard approach, it would then create one integration flow. And for the pipeline approach, if you choose the pipeline approach, it would then create all the artifacts required for the pipeline concept. It means that all the different scenario-specific flows and the partner directory entry. Yeah. And I will now show you a couple of scenarios so that you probably better understand how the pipeline concept or how the pipeline is configured for specific use cases. For this, I would swap to the browser. So I have my tenant here. Let's refresh. Maybe now I need to take on my glasses. First scenario that I would like to run is receive a list scenario, right? And I actually like to show you then a possibility to enhance the flows with custom header properties. And this way, you can actually use payload data to search your messages in the message monitoring, right? And if I check here on this scenario-specific first flow, right? This is the very first flow where the message comes in, and then it's passed to the generic flows. So we have enhanced the template so that you can actually set custom header properties, which then would show up in the monitoring, right? And for this, now in my case, for this specific example, the incoming message is a JSON message, right? And so I need to pass this, right? For this one, you need to create your own script, but then the rest would be then actually standard, right? And there actually have two different possibilities how to define custom header properties. One is the old one where we actually define this custom header properties, and then a list of key value pairs, right? So my custom header property name is purchase order, and then here I put it separate by column. I put in the actual purchase order, right? And another option would be that we simply I need to go here on the properties. Another option, and which we would prefer now, but we still keep the old version for compatibility reason, simply to create different exchange properties, right? Different exchange properties, and then run a script, right? And the script adds actually this key value pair to this header. And then we pass this header to the generic flows. And this is actually then passed through all generic flows. And in the generic flows, we would then add those custom header properties. So I will now send a sample message, right? Just 2 sample messages. And let's go into the monitoring. This one is in the way. Let's duplicate this. So in the monitoring, let's first go to the partner directory that you can see how this has been defined, right? So I will run this scenario 1A. Just need to check here, yes. And here you can see, so we actually use then the partner directory to define the content-based routing and to define how the scenario is configured, right? Here, for instance, as said, we have an incoming JSON message, and so we need to do an inbound conversion from JSON to XML. For this, we actually call a scenario-specific flow, and this is the endpoint of the flow that we call, right? So you need to maintain this endpoint. Or we can specify the number of maximum JMS retries. Right? By default, it's 5. And after, in this case, after 1 retry, the message would actually be sent to the data queue. Right? On the binary parameters, you actually see the receiver determination. If I download this, right, let's see, then you can see how such an XSLT has been defined. And so we actually use this XSLT to define our content-based routing, right? So here this is based on a category. And if the category is keyboard, we would then add a new receiver, and we would also add the interface information, right? And on the alternative partner, that's where we map the sender system name and the interface name to this partner ID, to the scenario, right? And you see that I have chosen a specific naming convention. So all my configuration scenario, I start with CS underscore, right? And then there is also possibility that you can actually define business systems. And here I would use the naming convention BS underscore, right? With this, then you can easily also then distinguish the different partner IDs, right? Because you might also use the partner directory for different scenarios, right? Good, then let's check how the monitoring looks like. I prefer nowadays entering via this message status overview. And then I would filter by sender. And actually I have sent 2 messages, and then you can see we have 18 logs in total. So for each message, 9 logs, right? And if you only like to filter on the logs which belong to a specific message, you can here click on this collation ID, right? And now it would actually filter on these logs. And if I scroll down here, then you can see that those are the custom headers, right, which we have defined. Right? So you can then see how the flow runs. So it actually starts with step number 1. Then it actually calls the pipeline. The pipeline itself calls the step number 3 to do the conversion between JSON and XML. And then we run this XSLT, we read the XSLT from the partner directory, we run the XSLT to determine the receivers. And at the end, I think we have determined 3 receivers, as you can see here, right? And that at the end, we would then call the scenario-specific outbound flows, where we do the actual mapping and pass the message to the receiver, right? And all the flows now, if you can see, if I click on this one, all the flows have actually custom headers added to the log, right? So that you can search for those specific values in here above, right? In this custom header field. Good. Another example which I would like to show you is an XI inbound scenario where we actually use different so-called staging. That means we use different business system names depending on whether you're running your scenarios on development, quality assurance, or production system, right? And we also have used the custom pre-processing and the sender wildcard, right? So here we actually leverage quite a lot of features. So let's just send out also two messages. So I actually use Postman, right, on my other screen. So you don't see this here. And before I enter monitor, I like to show you how this scenario is configured in the partner directory. Right? Then you can see here in this. So we have again this max JMS retries that you can configure. We specify what is the inbound queue, right, that we like to use. So by default, this is the inbound queue of this integrated messaging pipeline, right? We also have a fully decoupled pipeline, which we still keep for compatibility reasons, but my recommendation would be to go for the integrated messaging runtime because it requires actually less resources, right? And also would end up with less number of logs, right? And here you can see a new feature that we have just recently introduced, a possibility that you can actually call another integration flow to do your any custom logic, like probably if you like to log your message somewhere, or you like to discard the message because your system is in maintenance, right? And then you could actually switch on this custom pre-processing by specifying, first of all, the endpoint of the custom pre-processing integration flow, and here a list of pipeline steps where the pre-processing should be used, that should be called, right? In our case, I simply added all pipeline steps. So it would actually then call, in our case, for the XI inbound, for the integrated messaging, since we use integrated messaging, 4 and 5 are not run through, but 6 would then be the outbound, right? And so what I could do, maybe I can just change this and remove the 6. Let's just take 2, right? I just change this, save, and I rerun another. And then let's see how the monitoring looks like. Here on the binary parameter, again, you see this receiver determination. This is the XSLT to determine the number of receivers. And on the alternative partners, there you can see how we actually support so-called sender wildcard scenarios, right? So if you have 2 senders which use the same configuration, you can simply add those 2 senders in this alternative partners, right? If your message comes in, sender number 1, and with this specific interface, it would then be matched to this scenario. And then with this scenario name, we would then read this XSLT mapping, and we would read all the 3 parameters here, right? The same for the other system. And what we also do here is that we convert the real business name into an alias name. So what you can see here is the alias name, right? Is it a pipeline we used in the alias name? But we actually send with the actual name, right? And I could show you how this is being configured. So let's take this BSDD1 alias name, right? And what we do here, we need to specify a business system, a partner ID for the business system, and map the actual name to this alias name, right? And depending on where we run the scenario, whether it's in production or quality assurance development, it's all supported then, right? So if this is, I think my system is this quality assurance system, so I would send a message with this sender, it would be mapped to this, and with this, I would then fetch my, via this alternative partner mapping, fetch my scenario name, right? So this staging is actually only used when you use IDOCS or XI, right? For all other scenarios, you actually wouldn't need this, right? Okay, then let's check the monitoring again. Let's go to the, oh, there's even one error I just saw. Let's see, something did not work, I guess, here. Yeah. But so you see here that the system 2, Okay, went to an error. Okay. Here for the first system, then you can see again this log. Here we have it. We use actually the generic inbound XI, right? Since this is an XI inbound scenario, we pass this message to the messaging runtime. In our case, we haven't defined any custom headers based on payload. But if you use XI inbound, we set a quality of service, right? So that you can see whether it's exactly once or best effort. By the way, we also support synchronous use cases. So we also have a synchronous pipeline if you have synchronous content-based routing scenarios, right? And right now we only support exactly once and best of effort, so we don't support exactly once in order in the pipeline, right? And we also keep this alias information, right? Because here above you see those are actually the actual names, right? And you, as you can see, our environment is the quality insurance environment, right? And then we have the actual business names. And what you can also see is the custom pre-processing, right? Here we have called custom pre-processing for all pipeline steps, right? And then we have defined a custom header that you can see which pipeline step has called this custom pre-processing flow, right? We keep this information, right? Like, and you remember at the beginning, we actually have called custom pre-processing for all pipeline steps, right? Then you would actually see such an entry for all pipeline steps here, right? And number 6 as well. And for the last one, I just need to double check which was the last one. There is an error. Max retries exceeded. Okay, this is also a good showcase. So what happens if the max retry is exceeded? It goes into escalation, right? And then here on the attachment, you find additional information. And here you can actually find then all the information that might help to find the root cause of the error, right? And you also find here very last information that the maximum number of retries have been exceeded, and then you get the information that the message has been removed from this JMS queue and put into the data queue, right? And if you would like to restart this message, you need to go to the JMS queue. Maybe I can do this. Go to the JMS queue. Then we have that letter queue. Where is it? Here. Right. And then, by the way, there is also a new feature that you can now move selective messages, right? Before we only supported the move of all messages, right? If I move from here, let's say move all messages, and from here I can move selected. I mean, in our case, we only have one, but assuming we would have more, and then you can actually move this selected message back to this queue, right? Where is it? Here, right? And now it's moved back to the actual pipeline, and from there it will be restarted again, right? I mean, in our case, it will fail again. Yeah. Good. Some more scenarios. Maybe I just show you how those are configured, right? So if you have pure point-to-point scenarios, for instance, right? You can go to partner directory. Here I have scenario number 5. And here for pure point-to-point, there is no need to define an XSLT to determine the receivers, right? So here you would actually define string parameters, right? Here you would then define what is the receiver, right? And where can I actually access the very last flow, right? Where I run my mapping, right? And this is one of the bypass options that I mentioned. Yeah. And the last scenario is this custom receiver determination, right? So here I have the possibility, instead of using the XSLT, to actually call an integration flow, which would run then the custom receiver determination, right? So if I prefer to use another technology other than XSLT, or also in case of this extended receiver determination, I could then define this custom XLA endpoint string parameter, and then it would actually call this flow to determine the list of my receivers. Yeah. Good. So you can try it out on your own. So there is a GitHub repository. Here you actually find the different packages and the Postman collection and a brief description about each pipeline feature, which is used by the different scenarios. So you can enter the GitHub repository, and this helps you actually to set up your own scenarios to play around a bit. I just missed something what I like to show you. I also like to show you the migration, right? Let's go here. So in case you like to actually use the migration tool, I'll show you how this works. And by the way, we also have this as a tech session, right? So for the migration, using the migration wizard, right, I need a package. That's the wrong package. I like to just use an empty one, right? I go to artifacts, right? And if I switch to edit mode, then you will find this migrate button. This migrate button will actually trigger the migration wizard, right? First, you need to select your process orchestration system from which you like to migrate your scenarios. In this case, we only have one, but we might have a list of different process orchestration systems, right? We go next, and then we can choose the source integrated configuration object. You can also use receiver determination if you connect to a PI dual stack system. In our case, it's a PO system. So this would actually then provide you the error that this is not possible on process orchestration because we don't support those classical scenarios, right? Let's go back to integrated configuration. Then from here, I can select a scenario. I can search here. I simply select this one, go next. Now in this step, the best fit pattern is actually determined. And here it could be content-based routing or recipient list, right? Content for both cases, you need to carry out an XPath to determine the receiver. For content-based routing, you only end up with one single receiver, right? But for the receiver list, it could be that you send a message to multiple receivers. So that's the difference. If you select the pipeline approach, it doesn't matter, right? So here simply use another content-based routing, and then you can choose between standard approach and pipeline. As said, for the standard approach, I simply create one single integration flow, and for the pipeline, I create all those objects which are relevant or which run the pipeline, right? I go next, then I can actually create a message mapping, a reusable artifact, or I can, let's just create here a new reusable artifact. Next, and if I have run a similar scenario with the same mapping, I could then actually reuse this artifact. And in my case, it would be created. Next step. And now this last screen here is distinguished from the standard approach. The standard approach is simply maintain an integration flow name. And here you actually need to specify a scenario name, right? So, as I said, I always start with CS for configuration scenario, and then we can have dev top, right? And here below, So maybe also the, oops. Right, so this is the scenario name, and the scenario name is used to specify the integration flow names and the endpoints, because the endpoints need to be unique, right? And you can override the standard component. Standard component, which was proposed here, came from process orchestration, right? And the sender interface, but you can also override this and if you like to apply a different naming convention on your cloud integration system, for instance. By default, we point to the integrated messaging runtime, right? If you like to use the fully decoupled, you would need to change this to Q, right? As I said, I stick to the integrated. It has detected that there is a conversion from, I think here as well, from JSON to XML. So it would also create an inbound conversion integration flow where we do the conversion. And this is the endpoint of this conversion flow, which is then called by the generic flows. And below you see actually the different potential receivers with their XPath, right? And based on this information, the XLT would then be created, right? If we go to review now, and then I can click on migrate, and now all the relevant objects are automatically created. So you can see we have an inbound processing flow, right? Where the message comes in. This defines more or less the sender adapter. We have an inbound conversion where we do the conversion from JSON to XML. So here we go, right? So it's called via PostDirect. And here you have this conversion, right, from JSON to XML. And here on the Process Direct flow, then you will notice this is exactly the key, which the endpoint which we have defined in the migration wizard. Right? And if you go to the partner directory, right, then you see that the partner directory object has been created, and it's now jumped to the partner directory. And here we go. This has been created automatically. You see the string parameter. You see the binary parameter, right? This is your XSLT, which has been automatically created. And you see the mapping of the sender and the sender interface to this scenario, right? And from here, you can then also maintain your scenario, like, right, if you don't like to use the standard JMS retry, then you can also reduce this to 2, for instance. Right, and here we go. Good, going back to my slide decks. Yeah, so I said, try it out on your own. And then I would like to point to 2 sessions. One is at TechEd on the left side, right? We are actually running a hands-on session at TechEd, modernize and transform your integration to the cloud, where we actually run through the migration wizard and leveraging the pipeline approach, and also run the scenario using the pipeline. And there are also a couple of enhancements which we do in the hands-on workshop at TechEd in Berlin. And there is another session upcoming within this Devtoberfest. I think it's, when was it scheduled? 8th of October. I need to check, double check. And
So that
this
is scheduled for the 15th of October.
Sorry, thanks.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, so this is Lorena. She has actually created a so-called accelerator tool for the pipeline, which helps you to configure the pipeline, right, in a very convenient way. So like generating the XSLTs, right? There you can maintain the XPath in her tool, and you can maintain the parameters in the tool. You can read the complete partner directory, and you can do changes in a tool is reflected in the partner directory, right? So this is a pretty cool tool, which ease the usage of the pipeline, and especially when it comes to the creation of the XSLT, right? So, I mean, if you migrate from Process Orchestration, then you actually would use the migration tool. But if you start from scratch, you could then actually use her accelerator tool to create all those relevant partner directory entries in the partner directory. Yeah. And that's it. And then I would be open to questions. Is there any question in chat already?
There are no questions specifically on the chat. There is one comment, but before I go to that comment, I just want to thank you for everything that you've shared so far. You know, it's very exciting to see, for example, very cool how it has evolved, right? Like the pipeline went from being a concept to a complete sort of solution that is
Yeah.
deeply integrated in cloud integration. And you showed us that, right, with the entire demo and showing us how, for example, even in the migration process now, the pipeline is included there, but also it's like how it ends up creating all those different objects that we require in order to adopt the pipeline, right, for cloud
Yeah.
integration. Now, in my view, but I'm a bit familiar with all the concepts and everything that you've explained in this session. It doesn't coming from the PIPO perspective and doing lots of development there. Like personally, I don't think that if you have those sort of concepts, well, if you understand those concepts really well, then it's simple to sort of understand like what's behind the pipeline, right? But there's one comment on a chat who says it looks complicated. So what would you
Yeah.
say to someone that his experience or what he's seeing looks complicated? What would you say to that?
Yeah, I agree that there is quite a hurdle to get into the topic. I fully understand, and I wasn't also explaining the whole concept very properly, right? At the beginning, it looks complicated, but at the end, if you work with this, then you get used to it, then and understand the whole concept. Then yeah, I mean, and at the end, it's not so complicated anymore because actually, I mean, you don't need to go into the generic flows, right? It's all provided by us, right? So there's smallest provided by us, and you don't need to take care of this, right? You simply need to configure your scenarios. I mean, if you can use the migration tool, the objects are even automatically created. You know, it adds some complexity. I agree. It takes probably some time to get into this. Once you are in, and I think then it should be fine, right? Yeah. But it also comes, I mean, it comes with advantages, right? And this is out of the box error handling, restart capability, um, exactly once delivery. So exactly what you're used to have in process orchestration, right? I mean, we do support this all in cloud integration, right? But you always need to model this explicitly, right? But here we model this for you, and then you just leverage the pipeline, and this comes out of the box. At the end, it helps you to ease the implementation. Yeah. So maybe go to the GitHub, try out 1, 2 scenarios to get familiar with this, and then yeah.
Cool. It's good that you mentioned the GitHub repo because I actually have a question regarding that. So you showed us a GitHub repo, right? But what's in that repo actually complements what's in the SAP Business Accelerator Hub, right? Which is where we find the pipelines themselves. Is that correct? Or
Yeah.
what's the relationship between both? Okay.
Yeah, the business accelerator, that's the pipeline itself, right?
Yeah.
So those are all the generic flows that you need to deploy, right? So you need to copy the packages to your design area. We deploy the generic flows, and the GitHub, those are sample scenarios, right? So the scenarios that I showed you, right? So all the scenarios that I showed you today are actually part of the GitHub. So there is a Postman collection which helps you to create all the partner directory objects, and via the Postman collection you can also send test messages,
Okay.
right? And I mean, on the GitHub, all the package, all the integration of the scenario specific flows, right, which actually customers need to create, have been provided as a sample, right?
Excellent. And just to clarify one bit, we've mentioned process integration and process orchestration many times during the session, but in order for me to get familiar with the pipeline for cloud integration and by leveraging, for example, that GitHub repo that you showed us, I don't really need a PIPO, right? Connected to my SAP integration suite.
Yeah, you don't need. I mean, the motivation was to actually accelerate the migration of your PIPO scenarios to cloud integration, but you can actually use the very same solution or the very same concepts also if you start from scratch on cloud integration, right? Like decoupling your flows to ensure exactly once delivery, or the custom header properties, for instance, to improve monitoring of the logs or the information in the logs, and restart handling and so on. Right? So actually, yeah, it comes from process orchestration, but you can also use this for any scenarios. Actually, mainly async scenarios, right? But as said, also for sync scenarios, this pipeline concept can be applied. Right?
Yeah, one thing that I like is that in the end, it does end up including all of those best practices that we've been talking about when developing integration flows, right? All those best practices that you can find, for example, in the SAP Business Area Hub, they are basically embedded within the pipeline for cloud integration. So it's you should definitely check it out for sure. Alan says, thank you very much for sharing. And there are no more questions as part of the session. So again, Alex, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and expertise as part of this session. It was really good to learn more about the pipeline for cloud integration. I also want to thank the viewer for joining the live event or the recording, because obviously this is recorded. You might end up watching it later. And just a friendly reminder that there is plenty for everyone to learn during the TOEFest. So make sure to check out other sessions that are part of the event. So that's it. Thank you very much.